Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When architect Mark Davis inherited a quiet lakeside plot, he saw a dream waiting to be built. What he didn't expect was a war with the local HOA queenpin, a trespassing mansion, and a legal battle that would end with bulldozers, viral fame, and one epic dose of justice. When my uncle passed away last spring, I didn't expect to inherit much more than a few old tools and some vintage fishing gear. But to my surprise, he left me the deed to his 40-acre plot of land by Crystal Lake, a secluded tree-lined expanse just outside a quiet HOA-controlled community. As an architect who'd spent the last 15 years designing other people's dream homes, the thought of finally creating my own retreat on land I owned outright felt like the perfect shift in life's trajectory. I made everything official within a month, cleared probate, transferred the title, updated the county registry, and pulled all historical records. The plot had been in my family for nearly 70 years, untouched for the last 2 decades. From the satellite images and old surveys, I knew it needed work. Downed trees, overgrown brush, and no fencing to speak of. But to me, it was pure potential. A clean canvas for a lakeside getaway, maybe with a long wraparound porch, a workshop, and enough distance from the world to actually breathe. So, one crisp Friday morning, I drove up to the property with a hired crew, a licensed surveyor, 2 technicians with GPS scanners, and a drone operator I'd worked with before. My truck was loaded with maps, property records, boundary stakes, and a thermos of strong coffee. The plan was simple: run a full survey, map out the build zone, mark the property lines, and start clearing the land for fencing. The moment we stepped onto the lot, I felt a strange calm. The land had character, tall pines creaking in the breeze, the glint of the lake visible through the trees, birdsong echoing off the stillness. As the team began unpacking their gear, I took a slow walk along the eastern edge, mentally sketching where the house might sit, where the sunlight fell best in the mornings. For the first time in years, I felt untethered from deadlines and blueprints written for someone else. This was mine. We were about 30 minutes into scanning and staking when I noticed movement near the tree line. A woman was speed-walking toward us from the direction of the neighboring HOA community. Blonde bob, power stance, and a clipboard clutched like a weapon. Even from a distance, I could hear the crunch of her boots on the gravel path and the rising pitch of her voice. I didn't know her yet, but I had a feeling I was about to. She didn't bother with introductions. She marched straight up to me, eyes narrowed and mouth already in mid-sentence. "This is private property. You and your crew need to leave immediately." Her voice was sharp, loud enough to turn heads, and carried that particular tone only people convinced of their own authority seemed to possess. I blinked, a little stunned by the sudden hostility. "I think you're mistaken," I said calmly. "This land is mine. I have the deed, the updated plat maps, and the survey crew here to confirm the boundaries." She scoffed, flipping open the clipboard like she was presenting some ironclad verdict. "This entire area is under the jurisdiction of the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association. You are standing on HOA-protected land. I'm Karen Downing, president of the board, and you're trespassing." I exchanged a quick glance with my surveyor, who raised an eyebrow and continued quietly calibrating his scanner. I turned back to her. "With all due respect, Karen, my name is Mark Davis, and I legally inherited this property. This parcel predates your subdivision by decades. You can check with the county. This land has never been part of your HOA." She stepped closer, invading my space, waving her papers in front of me like they could erase reality. "I don't care what paperwork you think you have. We've had agreements with the county. The HOA maintains trails through this area, and this entire strip is under our oversight." I couldn't help but let out a small laugh. "That might have worked on someone else, but not here. You're not even on your own land right now. We're standing well inside my boundary line. In fact, if you check that drone up there," I pointed upward where the buzzing quadcopter circled, "we're currently mapping every inch." That was apparently the last straw. She pulled out her phone with theatrical flair. "Then I guess the police can sort this out. I'm calling them now." I nodded. "Please do." 15 minutes later, a county patrol cruiser pulled up to the edge of the access road. 2 deputies stepped out, their relaxed demeanor shifting slightly when they saw the standoff playing out. Karen practically sprinted to them, her words tumbling over one another. "Officer, these men are trespassing. They're claiming land that belongs to the HOA. One of them even flew a drone over our homes." The senior deputy turned to me. "Sir?" I offered a polite nod and calmly handed over the folder from my backpack. I'm Mark Davis. Here's the will, the recorded deed, the survey application filed with the county, and a satellite overlay showing the parcel's borders. We're conducting a site assessment, nothing more." He flipped through the documents, then motioned to the surveyor. "You with him?" "Yes, sir," the man replied. "We're state licensed. This property's clearly recorded as Mr. Davis's. In fact, we've got something you'll want to see." He walked the officer over to his equipment and pointed to a series of digital maps on his tablet, then gestured toward the tree line. "That house," he said, pointing to a 2-story beige colonial visible through the woods, "is built well over the boundary. The patio, the pool, even the fence. 28% of the structure, conservatively, is sitting on Mr. Davis's land." The silence that followed could have swallowed a thunderclap. Karen froze. That's impossible. That can't be right. Our HOA filed the plans. Everything was approved." The deputy gave a long, low whistle. "Ma'am, this might be more complicated than you thought." Karen didn't speak to me again that day. After the officers left, one of them gently advising her to let the lawyers sort it out, she turned on her heel and stormed back into the woods toward her overbuilt mansion. I watched her go, wondering if she'd retreat into silence or come back with a new angle. I didn't have to wait long to find out. By the next morning, I was back on site with my crew, this time with bright orange property stakes hammered securely into the ground. We'd begun clearing underbrush and marking future fence posts when we heard the low growl of an approaching SUV. It pulled up hard onto the dirt path, tires crunching over twigs and gravel, and 2 men in black polo shirts stepped out. The matching logos on their chest read, "Cedar Ridge Security, HOA Muscle." One was built like a linebacker, the other wiry and twitchy, both with the same smug expression that screamed, "We're here to make you uncomfortable." The larger one stepped forward first. "This area's under HOA jurisdiction," he said flatly. "We've been authorized to remove any unauthorized personnel from the grounds. That includes you." I wiped my hands on my jeans and took a slow breath. "I don't know who told you that, but this is private property. My property. You're trespassing. You need to leave." The wiry one snorted. "That's not what we heard. HOA president says this guy's faking documents, stirring up trouble." The bigger one took a step closer, puffing out his chest. "You got 5 minutes to pack up and go before we do it for you." I saw my technician tense up nearby, sensing the shift. He'd been hauling survey gear to the truck when the wiry one stepped toward him and clamped a hand onto his shoulder. That was it. I crossed the distance in 3 strides and grabbed the man's wrist. "Take your hand off my guy. Now." He twisted toward me and raised his other hand, clearly ready to escalate, but I was done playing nice. I shoved his arm aside and drove my shoulder into his chest, sending him sprawling backward into the dirt. His partner lunged forward, but I turned and met him head-on, slamming a forearm into his collarbone with just enough force to send him stumbling. He cursed, nearly tripping over a root before bolting back toward the SUV. The first guy scrambled to his feet, covered in mud, glaring at me with wild eyes. "You just made a big mistake, buddy." I shook my head. "No, you did. You trespassed, you put hands on my employee, and you assaulted me on camera." I nodded toward the discreet trail cam mounted in a tree nearby, its little red light blinking happily. That made both of them pause. The bigger one spat on the ground, muttered something about lawyers, and climbed back into the vehicle. They peeled off seconds later, dust billowing in their wake. My team gathered around me, silent for a beat. Then the drone operator let out a low whistle. "That got real fast." I nodded, heart still thudding. "It's going to get worse. She's not backing down." And I was right. Less than an hour later, I got an alert from my email. A lawsuit had been filed. Karen wasn't retreating. She was going nuclear. The lawsuit came through like a thunderclap, loud, dramatic, and completely devoid of logic. Karen Downing had officially filed a civil complaint against me in county court. Her claims? Trespassing, emotional distress, harassment, physical intimidation, unauthorized drone surveillance, and, most absurdly, intent to demolish residential structures without due process. She was demanding a restraining order, full legal access to her property, and a jaw-dropping $500,000 in damages for mental trauma and disruption of peaceful enjoyment. I sat in my truck reading the filing on my phone, mouth slightly open in disbelief. Her attorney was some HOA-retained litigator from a boutique firm that specialized in nuisance enforcement cases, hardly equipped to handle something this real, this public, and this provable. She'd thrown every accusation she could think of into one bloated, desperate hail, Mary. My lawyer, Thomas Bryant, didn't even flinch when I forwarded him the complaint. He'd been dealing with HOA bullies for years and had the kind of courtroom calm you only get after being screamed at by a dozen Karens in pressed suits. "Well," he said during our first call, "she wants a fight. So let's give her one." Within 72 hours, Thomas had filed a countersuit. It was clean, aggressive, and backed by more documentation than most zoning commissions see in a year. The primary accusation: encroachment. Karen's home, her house, her pool, her custom pergola, even her vinyl privacy fence, was not just touching my land. Over 1/3 of it was sitting directly on it. Our filing included high-resolution drone images with overlays, 3 independent surveyor affidavits, a signed copy of my uncle's will, and title history going back to the 1950s. Thomas added claims for property damage, attempted fraud, physical assault, thanks to HOA Security's brief WWBA audition, and defamation from Karen's neighborhood smear campaign. We also dropped in a request for mandatory demolition of all structures crossing the boundary and sought $1.2 million in damages, not just for what had happened, but for the legal and construction delays she'd already caused. That same day, I received screenshots from a neighbor who lived 2 houses down from Karen. She'd apparently made a full post in the HOA Facebook group. "There's a man claiming our land is his. He's waving around fake papers, threatening to bulldoze my home. I'm scared for my safety and for this community. Please stand strong. We need to protect our neighborhood." Dozens of comments flooded in. Some neighbors were blindly supportive, urging her to stay strong, while others were clearly skeptical. One comment stood out: "I've lived here 10 years and always wondered why that house seemed too close to the woods. Could it really be on someone else's lot?" The real kicker came a day later when we received a letter from Karen's lawyer threatening to file a motion for emergency injunction to block me, Sarge, from building, entering, or modifying her vicinity. Thomas laughed. "She's trying to freeze your land while continuing to squat on it," he said. "And she's doing it with a legal strategy built out of Jenga blocks." The court scheduled an emergency hearing. Karen had drawn her line in the sand. What she didn't realize was that sand, it was mine. The days leading up to the hearing felt like a whirlwind. My legal team went into full offensive mode. Thomas brought in a property law expert, a forensic surveyor, and even a retired county zoning officer to prepare for court. He wasn't just building a defense, he was constructing a legal battering ram, and every piece of evidence we had was another brick in the wall we were about to drop on Karen. The forensic surveyor conducted an independent evaluation with LiDAR scans and GPS verification. The results were staggering. 35% of Karen's house, including her kitchen, guest bedroom, and pool deck, was over the line, squarely on my land. Not a disputed corner or a few feet into an easement. No, her home was deeply embedded in territory she never owned and never had rights to. Even worse for her, the paper trail showed that this wasn't some innocent construction error. Thomas obtained archived emails and communications between the original developers of Cedar Ridge and the HOA board from 10 years ago. Buried in a dusty planning file at the county office, we found a flagged survey discrepancy from when the subdivision was first being built. The developer had warned that one of the corner lots, Karen's future home, might overstep adjacent private land. The HOA at the time acknowledged the concern, but rather than correct it, they simply filed the build plans and pressed forward. But the real bombshell came from a former HOA board member, a man named Jim Halpern, who now lived out of state. Thomas tracked him down, and during a recorded Zoom deposition, Jim admitted that the board had known for years that Karen's property was partially on someone else's land. He'd even pushed for an internal review once, but Karen, then just a board member, had squashed it. She said, and I quote, "Nobody lives on that lot. It's just woods. If it ever comes up, we'll deal with it then." Well, then had finally arrived. Meanwhile, our drone operator stitched together a flawless aerial presentation showing the exact property lines, overlaid with current structures, time-stamped footage, and surveyor annotations. Thomas couldn't stop smiling during review. As if that wasn't enough, we obtained body cam footage from the deputy during the initial police visit, clear audio of the geodetic specialist pointing to the property line, and the officer himself saying, "Her whole pool's on his land," Add that to the trail camera footage of the HOA guards assaulting my technician, plus their own post-incident statements confirming Karen sent them to remove the squatters, and the puzzle was coming together beautifully. Karen, oblivious to the avalanche forming over her, doubled down. She kept posting inflammatory messages in the HOA group, even going so far as to circulate a petition demanding that the county block development adjacent to Cedar Ridge for security reasons. Her version of security apparently was pretending that my land was hers until someone forced her to admit otherwise. We knew she was bluffing, but the court didn't have to guess. We had the blueprints, the maps, the footage, the emails, and now a whistleblower testimony. Thomas looked at me the night before the hearing and said, "Mark, there's winning. And then there's burying your opponent. We're about to do both." Court day arrived with the kind of weight you feel in your bones. I pulled up to the courthouse early, suit pressed, files in hand, and heart steady. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was rightfully mine anymore. This was about standing up to arrogance, deception, and the kind of manufactured authority that ruins lives under the guise of community standards. Karen arrived with her entourage like she was walking into a gala, not a legal reckoning. Her perfectly tailored white blazer, oversized sunglasses, and smug posture were clearly meant to project control. Behind her were two HOA board members and a younger man in a sleek suit who looked like he just passed the bar last Tuesday. Her lawyer. Thomas and I entered the courtroom with quiet confidence. No theatrics, no grandstanding, just binders full of truth and a digital presentation locked and loaded. As the judge entered, Karen gave a little tilt of her chin like she already knew how this would go. She had no idea what was coming. Her attorney opened with a pitifully generic monologue about property confusion, emotional distress, and an intimidating outsider attempting to rewrite neighborhood history. He even waved vaguely toward me when he said intimidating, as if my existence was inherently threatening. The judge listened with a neutral expression but didn't write down a word. Not a good sign for them. Then it was our turn. Thomas stood and unleashed a methodical takedown that felt like watching a surgeon operate on a fraud. He started with the deed and inheritance documents, followed by the registered plat maps, the drone overlays, and the forensic survey results. The room was silent as he displayed side-by-side comparisons of the recorded property lines and where Karen's home actually stood, well over a third of it sitting on my land. Then came the kicker, the video deposition of former HOA board member Jim Halpern. As his recorded voice played, recounting how Karen and the board knowingly ignored the boundary issue, the color drained from Karen's face. It got worse. We played the body cam footage from the sheriff's deputy. The courtroom clearly heard the deputy say, "Her whole pool's on his land," and the surveyor confirming the measurements. Then came the trail cam footage, her hired security physically confronting my team, shoving my technician, and me stepping in to defend. Karen's lawyer objected, claiming it was inflammatory. The judge overruled it instantly. And then, Thomas brought out the HOA internal emails, the ones where Karen had written, "Nobody uses that lot. If someone ever tries to build there, we'll deal with it then." At that point, the mood in the room shifted. Even the court clerk looked uncomfortable. Karen's attorney asked for a recess. The judge denied it. Finally, Karen herself was called to the stand. She tried to feign ignorance, claimed she had no idea her house was over the line, blamed the original developers, and insisted that she'd only acted to protect the community. Thomas calmly walked her through the timeline, her emails, her HOA Facebook posts, her decision to send in the security team, her refusal to acknowledge multiple warnings. When asked directly whether she'd ever reviewed the property boundaries before building her pool, she deflected again. That was the moment the judge raised a hand. "Mrs. Downing," he said, voice cool and heavy with finality, "the evidence is overwhelming. You knowingly trespassed, misled your HOA, endangered others through reckless behavior, and constructed permanent structures on land you never owned. Mr. Davis's claims are fully substantiated. All encroachments must be removed. Your counterclaim is dismissed with prejudice." Karen opened her mouth to speak, but the judge wasn't done. "In addition, I am awarding Mr. Davis full compensation for legal fees, damages to his land, and loss of project time. The court recommends an independent review of the Cedar Ridge HOA's conduct in this matter." There it was. A slam dunk so complete it felt surreal. I glanced over at Karen. The pride, the fire, the defiance, it was all gone. Replaced with something hollow, she wasn't just defeated, she was exposed. And justice had only just begun. The demolition was scheduled for a Friday morning, 2 weeks after the ruling. By then, the news had spread like wildfire. Local papers, real estate blogs, even a regional TV crew showed up to cover the luxury home built on stolen land story. I didn't invite them, but I didn't send them away either. The county sent out an enforcement officer to oversee the removal. A court-appointed demolition crew arrived just after 8 a.m., hard hats on, machines humming, and blueprints in hand. Their task was clear. Everything built beyond the legal boundary, deck, pool, fence, guest room extension, even part of the driveway, was to come down. Karen was there too. Of course she was. Standing just beyond the construction tape in a rumpled gray sweater and oversized sunglasses, she watched with clenched fists as her private oasis was systematically taken apart. She tried to argue with the officer, tried to plead with the site manager, even offered to pay to adjust the fence line. But it was too late for deals. That ship had sunk in court. The first crack of the excavator's bucket against the edge of her precious pool patio echoed through the woods like a rifle shot. A few bystanders, neighbors from Cedar Ridge, let out a low cheer. One even clapped. I stood a few paces away, arms crossed, watching as broken concrete and composite decking were lifted away like dead bark from a rotted tree. Karen finally lost it when the crew moved to the guest room that extended just over my property line. She shouted, "You're destroying my life. This is abuse." The officer reminded her she had been given 10 days to remove the structures herself. She hadn't touched a thing. I turned to one of the reporters standing nearby. "This was never about revenge," I said. "It was about boundaries, literal and legal." She ignored both. By noon, the backyard was a mess of rubble and dirt. The fence was gone. The pergola was gone. The pool, flattened. The only thing left was the look on Karen's face as she watched a bulldozer back over what used to be her sanctuary. Justice hadn't just been served, it had been delivered by heavy machinery. A few weeks after the dust had settled, both literally and legally, I returned to the property with a new plan in hand. Not for construction this time, but for a bit of poetic closure. The demolition crew had done a clean job. Where once stood Karen's pool deck and faux stone patio, now lay a level stretch of dirt and gravel, neutral, silent, and entirely mine. I had the area cleaned up, laid down some sod, and placed a single weather-resistant bench under a young pine tree that overlooked the lake. Then I installed a simple wooden sign on a stake, handcrafted with routed letters and sealed against the elements. It read, "Karen wanted to protect what she thought was hers. Now she has nothing." Beneath that, in smaller letters, "Before you call the cops, make sure the land under your porch is actually yours." It wasn't vindictive. It was a message, a reminder, a quiet warning to anyone who thought a clipboard and a loud voice could rewrite reality. I wasn't the kind of guy who went looking for a fight. But when someone tried to erase decades of family history with entitlement and fake authority, I fought back. With facts, law, and just enough patience to watch it all come crashing down. Word about the sign spread fast. A photo of it ended up on social media, and by the end of the month, it had gone viral. Memes, headlines, even a few podcasts picked it up. I got messages from strangers around the country, other property owners, small-town homeowners, people who had fought similar battles and lost, or won the hard way like I did. Some called me a hero. I wasn't. I was just a guy who knew where his boundaries were and refused to let someone else move them. As for Karen, last I heard, she was renting a modest condo in a neighboring town, far from the lake and far from HOA leadership. The Cedar Ridge HOA had been placed under review, and several board members had quietly stepped down. Nobody talks much about her anymore. The myth of her authority had crumbled along with her patio. And me. I finally got to start building the lake house I'd been dreaming of. One blueprint, one beam, one peaceful sunrise at a time. No fences this time, just clear lines. And a whole lot of space to breathe.